Hello, and thank you for watching this video from us here at Sustainable Aylesbury, where today we're going to be talking about circular economy and sustainability. Obviously, we're always talking about sustainability, but this time we're going to be imagining if Aylesbury's economy were circular, which is a great place to introduce my guest. So hello to my guest, Edward Sims. It's great to have you here with us today.
Hi, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be here. Great to be with you and colleagues from Sustainable Aylesbury. Thank you.
Perfect. So I should probably introduce myself as well. So I'm Bruce. I'm one of the founders of Sustainable Aylesbury, and I guess a good kind of starting point really is how we know each other and your sort of background in Aylesbury. We do know each other. We're friends. We've been to the pub before. We know each other from sort of around Aylesbury over the years, and in both a sort of professional capacity, but also in a pub capacity. So that's always fun.
Good point, Bruce. Good point, Bruce. Yeah.
And as far as your sort of relationship with the town is concerned, I'll let you explain that in your own words.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Yeah, as Bruce was saying, Bruce and I are friends from quite a long time. So I used to live in Aylesbury a few years back. I was working for Oak Dean Holland, which is a sustainability circular economy consultancy, which was based in Aylesbury. Working there with government contracts, corporate clients, working on sustainability questions, circular economy questions, and also whilst in Aylesbury, I was also a local councillor on the Aylesbury Town Council and on the Aylesbury Vale District Council. And there, I'm sure Bruce is going to dive into that in further sessions. I've heard that he's going to get Mark Wynne on the line, which should be great. There, the council was very advanced on recycling, and I'll talk, and very good. That's why you have the different bins outside your house every week for recycling. So Aylesbury Vale was one of the most advanced councils, I think, in the UK, maybe even Europe, in terms of separate recycling, even from a very early point onwards. And I remember the old which was smelly but essential part of circular economy. So yeah, Bruce and I were good friends in Aylesbury, and we had many a good time out in the various pubs of Aylesbury. Back to you, Bruce.
Indeed, we did. Okay, so great. So obviously, good to have you on. You were actually my local councillor when you were a councillor in Aylesbury too. I'm Central Aylesbury.
Indeed.
There we go. So I guess what do you do now? What does your day-to-day look like now?
So now my day-to-day is, so I'm working for EY, which is a global consultancy and accounting company. People on the chat might have heard of it before. It used to be called Ernst & Young. Our headquarters are actually in London, at More London, beside HMS Belfast. I have a global role, but I'm currently based in Brussels. I used to be based in Paris, and I'm globally leading EY's Global Center of Excellence on Circular Economy. So working with all kinds of clients around the world on circular economy questions, big corporate clients, also medium-sized businesses. I've had clients in the UK, US, Eastern Europe, right across Europe, Asia, some prospects in Africa too. And basically, any of our EY clients who have a question on circular economy, I will, with the team here in Brussels, we will help them out. So we will work with the local EY project team and with the clients. So it could be government clients, it could be small companies, large companies, also international organizations like World Bank, UNDP, European Union, sometimes British government as well. We help them with the circular economy questions. So it's really fascinating work, and we see circular economy as a vital part of the sustainability drive. And we see that the current UK government is also very passionate about sustainability, and there's a lot going on, which is great. And we've got the COP conference coming up in Glasgow at the end of this year, which should be vital. And circular economy, I'm going to talk about a bit later, Bruce, but circular economy is a vital part of our fight against climate change. So with climate change, we need to keep global warming below 2 degrees C. A lot of the focus has been on energy efficiency, reducing energy emissions, and the actual gases, but that will only keep temperature under one degree C. So to find the extra 1 degree, we need to work on circular economy holistically as a society. And I'm going to explain, because it's a bit vague, circular economy, so I'm going to talk about it a bit in more detail, Bruce, but back to you. Yeah.
I think that's a good thing to sort of pick up on there, that what exactly is a circular economy, what actually is sustainability, and how does it kind of fit into the big picture. But we're going to hopefully focus on over the course of our chat is kind of what that means at a sort of town level, because obviously we're all individuals, we all have a role to play. We can all live more sustainably, we can all live in a more circular fashion. So hopefully that's been a useful piece of introduction as to who you are and why I'm actually talking to you today. In that your work is directly relevant to some of our aims here at Sustainable Aylesbury, which is really cool. So we've touched on it a little bit, but what exactly is the circular economy? What is that? What does it mean?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And just to explain it very simply, because we have all these very complicated concepts, but it's good as a consultant also to break things down simply. It's basically keeping materials in the loop. So in the economy, we all use lots of materials. So we use metal to make the cans, which we then package our beer in the cans. We want to keep, rather than throwing that can away and that going to the landfill, we want to take that can back, reuse it, give it another useful life. It could be a can again, it could be a part of a car. So it's really thinking of all material, everything we use, because everything we do. Bruce also works in the services sector, but the services sector also is dependent on materials. So Bruce uses servers, etc. He needs electricity for his computer. So everything is really dependent. The whole economy and whole society is really dependent on material, and keeping that material in the loop for as long as possible. So that's where the circular is, and really thinking, designing out waste as well. It's a bit the mentality that we had during World War II, when in order to build our, let's say, tanks, warplanes, etc., there wasn't enough raw material. So we had to find new raw material, stuff that would have potentially been waste before, or other uses we used to build our machinery out of. So we need to go back to this mentality. And just to illustrate, Bruce, concretely, so right now, as a society, not just UK, but as a global society, we use about 2 planets worth of material every year for the levels of consumption we have. So this is clearly not sustainable. And as other economies, especially in East Asia, become richer, these guys are going to demand to have the same levels of consumption as us, which is fair enough. But there just isn't the physical material to sustain this kind of on the planet, to sustain this kind of consumption. If we just go and extract new raw materials, we just mine, we extract more oil every time we want to grow the economy. So it's this very important for Aylesbury, is this decoupling. So we still want economic growth because we want to lift people out of poverty. We want people to have a good lifestyle, but we don't want the growth to be constantly linked to extracting more raw materials. So we want to sort of decouple. Yeah.
So do you feel it's actually possible to have both, to have ever sustained GDP growth while having sustainable economies in sort of Western society? You mentioned that we're using 2.5 Earths worth of kind of resources, and the demand on our planet's resources is growing as the developing economies need more of that.
Bruce, that's an excellent point, and if we want to have this sustained economic growth, but we want to have a climate for the future, because what is the point of having money if there is no climate and we can't enjoy the money, and there is no planet left to enjoy the resources? We need to this decoupling is vital, and this also what you're doing in the UK and across Europe, decoupling energy from non-renewable to renewable. This is also essential too, because if we build the wind turbines, if we build the solar, if we build the wave power, and obviously it requires maintenance as well. It requires resources to build the infrastructure. But this then becomes essentially free energy for the future. So it's this kind of decoupling mentality. The same for materials. If we have a reusable plastic bottle that we can use 100 times or 200 times, or an aluminium can that can be basically infinite loop, then we sort of decouple, so we can keep consuming going forward, but it's not costing the planet every time we consume. It's this kind of thinking. And also from we talk about circular economy because, Bruce, you raise a good point. So this kind of decoupling, there are certain movements that just want to decouple, slow down growth, consume less. This is all very well, but circular economy, I always talk with my clients, is circular. So there's an environmental aspect, but there's also an economic aspect, because people need to eat as well. People need to make a profit. So the business models are profitable in circular economy too. That's very important to get across. We're not just in circular economy, we're not just geeks talking about waste management. We're talking about serious business models, and we have serious conversations with big players. For instance, Bruce, I won't go into names, but over the past couple of years, I've worked with a major brewer in Eastern Europe on their circular economy, and they were rethinking about their whole packaging. So so we actually helped them with a piece of compliance work. So there's a lot of regulations on plastics. People will have seen this. So the first project we did with them was compliance, because they were selling a lot of their beer in Romania in plastic bottles. So they were concerned about the regulation. How can they comply with the upcoming regulation on plastic bottles and still sell the beer to the clients? So we helped them with that question. Then we moved on to, a year later, we moved on to a more fundamental question, rethinking all their packaging. So for 5 to 10 years forward, all material types, so taking a material neutral perspective, what is just the overall best economically, but also for the environment. So we looked at plastics, we looked at aluminium, and we also looked at bio-based materials. You might have seen these paper bottles that Coca-Cola, Carlsberg are developing. We took a neutral approach, and we also helped them think, when discussed their packaging, we also helped them think about circularity. And especially with COVID, selling direct to consumer, because all the pubs and restaurants were closed. They were producing a lot of beer. They can't sell to the pubs and restaurants. Why not sell directly to the customer? And what type of packaging do you need to sell directly to the customer? The packaging changes, because if you sell direct to customer, then you can pick it up again, rewash it, fill it, and sell it again.
Right.
It's changing the whole thinking. And we also thought with them, a new business model could be monthly subscription or weekly subscription. So people just get. We even called it a beer as a service, Bruce, which I'm sure you might be interested in.
As a service, working in IT.
Beer is guaranteed to be in your fridge on a weekly basis, and they will take away the packaging, refill it for you. So it's changing the whole thinking of everything, rather than just being an old traditional old brewery that just sells it to the restaurant or the pubs. It's really, that's why circular is so interesting for us. Not just as an environment, but it's creating new business models, new ways of doing business, which can actually be good for the environment and importantly make profit, because business is not going to stay in business if it doesn't make profit. Otherwise, it's just charity.
Right. Yep, indeed. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on, so fundamentally, is it possible to have infinite growth and a circular, sustainable economy, or does something more really fundamental need to change in the way that our society works in the West?
I think you raise a very good point, Bruce. I mean, infinite growth, it's difficult to say, because I don't think infinite growth is possible within planetary boundaries, but reasonable amounts of growth within planetary boundaries, and adopting circular principles, but also adopting carbon neutral principles. So linking up to what I was saying earlier, we get 1 degree centigrade, stopping 1 degree centigrade of temperature increase by circular principles, but the other 1 degree, we need to work on carbon neutrality. So not emitting all this carbon into the atmosphere, which is really warming up our planet too. So we need to link both things. We need an economy that works as well for society, because we need to pay for our NHS, we need to pay for the military, we need to pay for social care. So there has to be money coming in. We can't contract the economy, because then we can't pay for the ever growing costs as well. The NHS keeps, as medicine prices go up, the costs go up, as actually wages go up. We want to be able to give people wage increases every year, but we also need to do that within planetary boundaries. So coming back to the point I was saying earlier, if we live on a planet where the ecosystems collapse, children can't go outside without wearing a gas mask. I mean, what's the point of having all the money in the world in such a system? So it's a sort of balance, and it's a gradual, let's say, decoupling process. Again, there's nothing wrong with economic growth, but it just has to decouple with constant resource use. That's the thing. So throughout our history, and especially since the Industrial Revolution, every economic growth has just gone up. You can draw the graph.
Onto the right graph.
It's just gone up entirely in line with using more and more resources. So energy resources, pollution, material resources. We need to decouple this. So there's nothing wrong with economic growth. It's just decoupling it from the resource use and thinking about the environment in this growth, in the overall policy. So in our overall societal policy and our economic policy, really putting environment, circular economy principles at the heart of this. And we could also link this back to social things, Bruce, as well, interestingly, because the less pollution we have, the healthier children will be, the less we'll need the NHS to look after their asthma, etc. So if we move from driving diesel trucks around the centre of Aylesbury to driving electric vehicle around, and actually we've been working with we know one of our brewery clients is actually moving to an electric vehicle fleet as well, which is interesting. So even in the brewery sector, when they're lugging around heavy beer bottles, they're thinking about electric vehicle fleet. So if you think of this kind of transition, this is also good for society as a whole, because the children will be healthier because there's not these heavy trucks driving through Aylesbury. There's electric vehicles which don't emit. And then there's less pressure on the NHS as well, because the children are not sick from the pollution. So there's a holistic view we need to really take. Sorry, Bruce, I'm monopolizing conversation.
It's all good. No problem. I think I can't see really anyone that loses out from sort of a personal perspective within our current economic system, with the exception of those that are entrenched in our current economic model and way in which we develop growth. And
this is a very important point, Bruce. So with any major shift, like in the Industrial Revolution, people moved from agriculture to the cities to work in industry. With this major shift to circular economy, there will be some losers, and they need to be retrained and upskilled. I know, it's difficult to say that, but certain jobs, how should we say it? Oil and gas is not exactly going to be the future in 50 years. Right. We need to retrain these people, upskill them into maybe repairing machinery or repairing equipment, which is circular, rather than just throwing away machinery. If we train people, something very irritating to me, a washing machine, and we get a technician in and they say it's going to cost about £200 for the part. That's ridiculous. And part and labor, when I can just buy a new one. But that's absolutely uncircular thinking. If the parts were taxed, if the labor could be taxed less and the workman could do the job, and if the parts were slightly less because there's more volume for it, then I don't need a new washing machine when it breaks down. I'll just have the chap come and fix it and install the new part. And then that's keeping this washing machine alive longer, and that's saving me from going out buying a new washing machine and sending this old one to the tip to hopefully be recycled, but not always. So
right. Well, and that's another valid point there. So recycled is obviously the lesser of reuse versus recycle. If you can keep that washing machine in active use, then great. You don't have to buy a new one.
We have this sort of you've probably seen this sort of let's say pyramid of the waste hierarchy, we call it in the industry. So obviously repairing is much better than recycling, and then recycling is much better than landfilling and incineration, and they're both at the bottom. And also, as you go up this pyramid, you're also creating extra value, so you're retaining value. If you repair that washing machine, it obviously has much more value to you, but also to society as a whole from an economic point of view, than if you're sending it to recycling, because then when you're sending it to recycling, it's taken apart for the parts, the metal might be valuable. And if it's sent to incineration, landfill, it becomes a net cost to you or to the company. So the higher up you can keep the waste hierarchy, also the economic benefit is there up the waste hierarchy.
Yeah, makes sense. So moving on slightly, thinking more about now sort of Aylesbury as a town and sort of individuals, because what we've talked about so far mostly has been in the realms of kind of government and business, which is all vital. And without it, we don't really stand a chance. But thinking now about sort of Aylesbury as a town, are there things that we could do as people of this town to make our economy more circular and therefore more sustainable?
Yeah, great question, Bruce. And I think if people continue to recycle and separate their waste, that's very important. So to get value out of the waste and to treat the waste properly, it needs to be correctly separated. So keeping those people systematically separating their waste, that's very important. They're helping out, because the waste can't be recycled. If you mix your organic waste with your plastics and your aluminium, it's going to clog up the whole system. There's no value, and it's eventually going to go to landfill or incineration. So people systematically managing their waste, and then thinking. I've seen in Aylesbury there's been repair cafes. This is also a very important part. So it's not business per se, but it's getting the concept out there. So you start with a charity like a repair cafe, and then maybe an electrical wholesaler like or supermarkets like Morrison's might actually have a repair section within them. So maybe, and it's also organizations such as yourself, Sustainable Aylesbury, really changing the mentality. So repair cafes, excellent example there. The waste management that was being done by AVDC, and now it's Buckinghamshire Council, I believe. Very good. So these larger organizations can lead. Maybe also large organizations like schools can lead. So what about in the school canteen? I know the schools have been closed for a year now. School canteen or hospital canteen, any food waste, can we find uses for that? Because when you're catering for thousands of school students or thousands of hospital patients in, say, Stoke Mandeville, you're going to have inherent amounts of food waste. How do we find value out of that food waste? So not only value for the environment, but also saving money for the government, the taxpayer who's paying for all that food as well. And then other things like charity shops. I mean, you might laugh, but it's also an important part of circular economy. You know, reusing clothes, and even H&M is big brands are big on circularity in clothing now. I mean, just an anecdote about H&M. So H&M thinks that the environment sustainability is so important that their former environment director actually became the CEO of the company. So you can see when a huge company like that promotes within the environment director to the actual overall CEO that sustainability is going to be important. I mean, you've got shops like M&S, H&M, where you can bring back your old clothes. That's very important. So ordinary people in Aylesbury can bring back their own clothes, and businesses also need to incentivize as well. I know they give you know, £2 or £3 coupons, but there's more that businesses can do as well. And then maybe for, you know, actual industry in Aylesbury, some kind of strategy or some kind of incentive to really incentivize more circular businesses to come to Aylesbury, because we have a very strong industrial heritage in Aylesbury, in places like Ravens Lane, Gatehouse, where we used to have a lot of industry. Why not somehow attract some circular economy actors to this area where we have a lot of the engineering expertise? We could upskill, retrain some of the people from the more linear economy, you know, making, I don't know, engineering, mechanical engineering, to some circular economy jobs actually in the town, which Aylesbury could be leading from the engineering mechanical perspective of circular economy things.
It makes a lot of sense. So, you know, you touched on a number of things that we're already kind of like working on and linked in with. So repair cafes, a great thing to do. I've always been a proponent for, you know, fixing, you know, usually myself. So another example of upskills. Usually it's sort of a repair cafe, places like that. You can take your broken appliance or whatever it might be to get repaired, but also you can usually find tricks and tips to how to actually, you know, do those things yourself to fix stuff as it breaks. And again, you mentioned charity shops. I wanted to mention good old Facebook Marketplace. You know, I know Facebook gets a bad press for a number of reasons, and rightly so in some of those cases. But Facebook Marketplace is, in my opinion, a great example of peer-to-peer circularity, because, you know, like you've got an old pair of jeans you don't want, you stick it on Facebook Marketplace. You might get some money for it, you might not. But it doesn't really matter, because someone else is going to get use of those clothes. Unlike taking it to, you know, a big clothing
jeans,
shop.
you know, jeans use hundreds of liters of water to produce one pair of jeans.
Jeans are a perfect example of something that to produce is just so bad. So to you know, to dispose of it any other way, even if you take it into H&M, while it will get recycled, typically it won't get reused typically. Whereas if you can find a buyer for it on Facebook Marketplace, as you were mentioning, essentially you get more value from it yourself, and that you'll actually make some money from selling your old pair of jeans. From a sort of sustainability perspective, that pair of jeans isn't being shipped somewhere to be recycled, or worse, thrown into landfill and costing the council money to dispose of. You know, it's a great example of something I think that we could all do locally to really help with sustainability. So I guess one thing about sort of sustainability and circular economy is 2.5 times the planet is what we need, you say. Does that mean essentially that we're going to, as individuals, have to make a large deal of sacrifice to truly, you know, continue to live? We're going to have to give up things to maintain our planet.
I think Bruce, you raise it's a very good point, and I think it's comes back to maybe also we can be more resource efficient, because as technology improves, you know, let's say 100 years ago, you could imagine how much coal was needed to make the electricity that now one or two solar panels can make. So with technological advancement, this can also be helpful. And then we get to more resource efficiency. Basically, what resource efficiency means, to simplify, is how much material and energy do I need to produce a certain product or service? And every year we also become much more resource efficient. So I'm hoping by adopting circular economy processes and thinking, and also combining that with improvements in technology, greater resource efficiency, we can maintain and also slightly improve our standard of living without moving to, by also reducing the amount of overall material that we use. So I think it's a combination of these things. So resource efficiency linked to technological advancements and greater efficiency year on year through these technological advancements, but also adopting circular economy thinking in the way we use material right across society.
It makes a lot of sense.
All kinds of materials. So a lot of focus recently has been put on plastics recently, but it's all kinds of materials. It's metals. Even moving to electric vehicles, there's not going to be enough metals physically in the world that we need, like nickel, tungsten.
Nickel's the one, isn't it?
Exactly, for the new EV batteries if we move to 100% fleet. So we absolutely have to have circular electric vehicle batteries, circular batteries. It's something I think the UK government is going to be working on. Other governments around the world are already thinking now strategically. And also in terms of, if we look at materials, certain strategic materials are also controlled by certain countries. For instance, China has a lot of what we call rare earths and other strategic minerals, and it can control access to these. So if we in Europe and UK and America are able to recycle properly all our smartphones, take them apart, extract the valuable material there, we don't have to become so material dependent on people like China who don't necessarily have the best human rights record. So it
keeps it more local.
Circular thinking is also important to overall national strategy and also national sovereignty, because the UK is not a great country in terms of access to raw materials and stuff. So we have to import all our materials for our industry, for everything we consume. So, but we have, if you think about it, you have 2 or 3 phones just in your drawer there. The material in those old phones could be extracted and used again to make new phones or to make new electric vehicle batteries or whatever. So it's really ensuring that this stuff doesn't just go to landfill, isn't actually just shipped in dirty containers over to, emerging countries which don't have the processes in place to treat the material correctly. That's the thing. So often we've done that in the past. We've shipped our waste overseas, but there's actually huge value in that waste if it's treated properly. And if we can find a way to retain that value and turn it into useful new products.
Yeah, makes total sense. You touched on something that was in one of my questions, which was kind of what do you see as being the role of government, and then more specifically, the local councils that make up, in the case of Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire County Council, in becoming more sustainable and secular.
I think in Aylesbury and Buckinghamshire, you're quite lucky already, because when I was on the council too, they were quite motivated. They already understood a lot of the circular economy principles, and especially on waste management. The councillors of all parties, so I was from a certain party, but the councillors of all parties really understood the importance of waste management. I think they could encourage more education about sustainability, circular economy in schools. That's very important. Linking back to what I was saying about food waste. So, if the children understood, wasting food, it's a very important topic as well. So many resources go into that food. I'm sure there could be much less food waste. And also recycling at school, and also making, the children are the future generation, so making them passionate about sustainability, circular economy is important as well, because they will be the future, and they will also be greatly impacted by climate change. So we need to do things like circular economy to mitigate and reduce the potential impacts of climate change, which is coming up in the future. So to get the children on board already now is vital. And as the council plays an important role in education policy, I think it can do a lot in terms of educating about this.
Couldn't agree more. I hadn't even thought about the educational aspects, but you're absolutely right. And speaking as a parent myself, I can certainly see times where we've attempted to educate ours in things like food waste and waste in general. So I can see that working quite nicely. So kind of moving on a little bit, so some more abstract questions. So in this realm, what is your sort of biggest worry? What worries you the most?
Yeah, I would say maybe Bruce that in action. So we have
Mm,
you've probably seen the stuff from BBC about the blue planet, etc. We have a limited time horizon, 5, 10, 15 years maximum to turn this
mm,
around. So we can't keep delaying. We are working a lot with governments, international organizations like World Bank, European Union, but also corporates. And these leaders that I speak to from these corporates and governments, etc., they understand. So some are actually taking really concrete action, but we need society as a whole. So we need also the smaller businesses, the one-man bands in Aylesbury to also take part in the circular, sustainable transition, decarbonization. It can't just be left only to the large businesses and governments. Everyone really needs to take their part.
mm,
When people say,
mm,
okay, I'm recycling my waste, or I'm taking my old clothes to H&M, it doesn't make a difference. Every single thing, every single person's actions makes a huge difference when you take it
mm,
cumulatively. So you should never say that me doing one small thing here doesn't make a difference, because we need everyone, absolutely everyone, to be on board. And also you get a snowball effect. So a couple of years ago, we didn't see so many corporates or investors interested in circular economy. Now we've got so
mm,
many, the phone never stops ringing. So we're seeing corporates, we're seeing investors, and we get a sort of snowball effect where you know, big companies have to do this now because their bankers and their investors are demanding them to, and their shareholders are demanding it to. So even another point for people at home in Aylesbury is you probably have some money. Maybe you're an investor in a company, even a
mm,
small amount. Maybe you have a pension fund. You can insist that where your money goes for your pension fund is invested sustainably and in circular companies. There you can make a big difference too. So
mm,
your savings, you can, even a couple of £100 you can put into and insist that it goes to companies that are sustainable, that are going to make a difference for you, for
mm.
your children, and also your grandchildren, and for the
Yeah.
for the future of Aylesbury. So there's a lot of power. Basically there's a lot of power. Everyone has power to wield. You might not think it, but
Yeah.
you do. You've got the power of the purse, the power of your actions when you buy stuff. Is because on a lot of products, there's a lot of information about how sustainable that product is as well. So yeah, there's a lot you can do individually, and then just your behavior. How do you deal with your waste? How do
Mm,
you deal with old materials that you don't necessarily need anymore? Are you putting it onto Facebook Marketplace like Bruce was talking about? Are you sorting it correctly, etc., etc.? So there's a lot you can do. And don't feel powerless, and
mm.
certainly don't feel disengaged, because then we won't get to where we need to be.
Inertia. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, really good points there. So, on sort of individual power, ultimately, these big companies, having worked for some over the years,
Mm.
are incentivized by making money. If they see a sort of better route for making money via something else than what they're currently doing, i.e., if you buy things that are more sustainable and
Mhm.
prioritize that, which may come at a cost at the moment,
Yeah,
we're looking at, for example, rather than buying all your fruit and veg from Tesco, looking at sort of local shops and farmers markets and that kind of thing, where they, are sourcing those things from in the local area. It keeps the money in the local area for a start,
yeah.
and it might cost, but that is ultimately the thing that's going to get the larger companies and corporations to realize, hang on a minute, we're not going to continue to sustain profit margins if this buying pattern continues, which is why I think we're seeing some of the sort of bigger corporates making these sorts of decisions. I'm glad you brought up banking as well.
Mhm.
I don't, obviously you'll be able to tell me much more than I can know on this, but I'm led to believe that that can have a massive amount of impact. Just switching your bank to a bank that isn't sort of investing in fossil fuels, for example, and is investing in ethical,
Yeah,
green and sustainable principles can have a massively changing difference.
exactly. We've seen, and actually, I won't say the client names, of course, but actually, I'm working on a piece in Eastern Europe. It's for large telecoms groups, and they are actually looking at something called ESG, which is their environment, social, and governance strategy, because they need to have a very solid environment strategy to get a loan from their major bank in
Mm,
London or wherever it is. So actually, their whole investment strategy depends on their environment strategy. So it's actually shifting billionaires right now and shifting big corporates. So again, people do have power, and by, let's say, maybe insisting when they next go to the bank how sustainable my investments? How sustainable are my savings? I
Mm-hmm.
want to put it in renewable energy. I want to put it in something that's circular. I want to put it in, you know, every time you have this conversation with your bank or your financial advisor, whoever it is, it's going to make the change gradually, because then they'll report it up the chain, and eventually it will get to the CEO of that bank, etc. That, look, all these customers are really demanding this. We need to do something about this. We need to look at this.
Yeah.
So again, it is a sort of people power, Bruce.
Yeah.
But let's say a
Agreed.
capitalist people power, but based on the solid market principles. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. So right now we're in the middle of switching our bank from one of the more sort of known banks to Triodos, who are known for ethical investing. So
Yes.
another, if they're losing custom because people like us are switching from them, and loads of other people as well, I'm sure, then that's going to be the way to get those banks to take action. So next question then, sort of following on from what worries you the most, where do you see hope right now?
Yeah, where I see hope, Bruce, is, again, it links back to the younger generation, just the passion of the younger generation. And we're both about 35. We seem a bit like old fogies to the new interns coming in. The new interns and younger staff in my organization are all universally passionate about sustainability environment. They don't necessarily work in our environment department, but they're passionate about it. They might be accountants, they might be financial advisors, they might be general consultants, they might work on tax, but they're all universally passionate about the environment, which is great. And they ask us a lot of questions, the professionals like us working on the environment, and they're really passionate to take the subject forward. And also the passion from the school children before, obviously, COVID, what was it, school strike for climate. This passion is great, because we need, again, it's education, but it's also action, So we need to also educate them a bit more about what they need to do, circular economy, decarbonization, all the technical aspects. They need to be on top of that. But it's great to see them take the action, which maybe some of the older generations haven't necessarily taken the action. Maybe some of the older generations, not our generation, but maybe generations slightly older than us, Bruce, have been a bit passive on the environment topic. We need to really, but now these older generations are being woken up by their children and grandchildren. That's great to see. I've seen this also with my parents, that they're impressed by all these school strike people as well. So the environment has actually come onto their radar recently. Maybe you've seen this with your parents as well, Bruce.
Yeah, certainly in part.
Yeah.
I wonder if
So
they'll
I
be
think
watching
this gives us hope that the younger generation, but it's great that they need to act, but they also need to be well educated and informed about what concretely needs to be done. Not just calling for action, but let's come up with concrete solutions that the government can implement.
What specific action?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that comes down to, as you say, the education point. Great. So at Sustainable Aylesbury, we want our town to be a thriving community, a town that thinks about its environmental impacts and actually takes action. So great point to lead into this question with. So with that in mind, what do you like about Aylesbury in its current form?
Yeah, I think Aylesbury, it has a lot of character, and especially, that I used to live around the old town, and I used to love walking around it. I think there's great opportunities to maybe pedestrianize certain parts of Aylesbury. And when we have this general transition to electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, it'll be so much nicer. So it would be a combination of pedestrianizing parts of it, and then obviously certain people, the disabled, etc., will always need a vehicle. But if we have a transition to electric vehicles, which are silent, don't pollute, hydrogen vehicles, which don't pollute, they actually emit water. Think how much nicer Aylesbury will be with this transition. So it's really thinking about the mobility in Aylesbury. It has a lovely, let's say, core heart of Aylesbury, the old town, which has thousands of years of history. We really need to build on that and build, as you say, a sustainable Aylesbury. I see the key, let's say, challenge is the mobility around in Aylesbury for sustainability, especially the way the roads have been built around that centre. And you see it a lot with people crisscrossing the country via Aylesbury to get to Oxford, Cambridge, etc. There's a lot of traffic congestion built up. So when we shift mobility to electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, but also shift to other forms of transport, so cycling, east-west rail, it's important as well. Shifting mobility away from just the road to, let's say, more sustainable forms of transport across the board.
Yeah,
And a lot of,
I
actually,
agree
on
with
this
that.
point, Bruce, we have a lot of automotive industry quite near Aylesbury. So, we used to, 100 years ago, we had a car plant in Aylesbury. We have the automotive sector in Oxford. We have the automotive sector up in Birmingham. And a lot of the UK automotive sector is actually very much on board with this shift to electric vehicle, hydrogen vehicle, the future of mobility. So the UK actually, and very near Aylesbury, we have the future of mobility, which is a sustainable future, which the industry is actually invested in for sustainability. So it's very exciting to see this and to see how we, let's say, rethink mobility in Aylesbury for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
So
And I think the town will become actually much nicer once the mobility questions are sorted out. Yeah.
I would agree there. So I'm also keen, personally speaking, to look at how we get around sort of locally, as well as just, between towns. Obviously, that's important.
Yeah.
And I think the key point there for me is the mode in which we travel. So not always jumping in the car, even if that car is powered by electricity or hydrogen. But looking at, the East-West rail link that you mentioned there, I think that's things like that, modes of getting around that don't involve personal, cars, basically, is going to be vital. And then in among the town, Aylesbury is essentially flat. It's the perfect place for active travel, basically. So cycling, these the e-scooter trial that's going on in Aylesbury right now, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens sort of there. Because, it's another form of transport that is green, and could, in theory, over time, take the place of sort of cars. But I think that's really, really key.
Then you need to work on the infrastructure plan as well, because
Indeed,
Bruce, because I remember the road, especially outside your house, it was very crowded. I mean, it might be suitable to build a cycle lane on that road. We've seen that overseas as well, in Brussels recently with the lockdown. We've seen one of the major roads through the city. It used to be 5 lane. It's been knocked down to 3 lanes, and on the 2 side lanes they built cycle paths. So actually, it's quite possible. If I remember, your road was about 3 lane, wasn't it, outside you? I mean, it could be knocked down to 2 lane with 1 cycle path.
Yeah. It's a dual carriage for most of it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, but I agree. Essentially, repurposing that existing space for active travel and encouraging people to actually, not just jump in the car.
Exactly.
So you've touched quite on my next question already, which is what would you like to see change? So I guess my final question really for you is, what's the one thing that you think that we can focus on as a community for the greatest local impact?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Bruce. I mean, I think there is a few things, such as people can take concrete action, so they can get involved in repair cafes. They can manage their waste correctly according to the council guidelines, etc. They can engage with the council about maybe other materials could be taken by the council. Maybe there could be 2 types of bags for plastics, etc., etc. So that kind of engagement, education. So for the future people can first of all educate themselves, which is very important, and also educate their children, grandchildren, future generations. Maybe be involved, go and speak at schools about sustainability, recycling, circular economy. That would be great, because I'm sure the educators, the teachers would want people with experience to come and speak about it. And to really also make a concrete difference in their daily life. So in their business, in their organization, maybe in their schools, other things, to really speak about sustainability, circular economy, and to think if they're in a business, they own a business, or if they're involved in business, how could they think maybe trial a circular economy business model within their business to make a concrete make a concrete change. So it's education, it's engagement, and it's concrete change as well.
Makes total sense. All right. Well, that's everything I had. So before we kind of leave, I've got a few final slides just to pop up.
Sure. And Bruce, it was a pleasure to be here. Great to speak with you again. And I really hope this sustainable Aylesbury takes off. I really see great potential for Aylesbury in terms of sustainability and circular economy. And it's a great town. It has lots of great potential for the future.
I agree. I completely agree. Wouldn't be sat here talking to you if I thought otherwise. So if you're interested in everything that Edward's been saying and you want to find out more, there's a link up on screen here, which is a bit.ly link, bit.ly/3F5L5JV qd. That sounds not particularly catchy, but it's a lot shorter than the original URL. That will take you to an article that Edward has written on exactly this. It's titled "The Circular Economy and EU Green Deal and Circular Cities." So the Circular Cities piece, there's lessons that we as a town could learn from.
Definitely. It's for cities, municipalities, towns. So not just cities and regions. There's lots we could learn as Aylesbury, but also as Buckinghamshire, etc.
Agreed. Second link that's worth checking out is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a great resource for kind of background reading and sort of self-training and education on sustainability and circular economy. And then finally, if you want to get in contact with Edwards, then his LinkedIn link is right here up on screen. So all that's left to say really is thank you for watching this video today. I hope it's been as interesting for you as a watcher as it has been for me to have this conversation with Edward. If you like what you've seen today, you can find this video and everything else at sustainableaylesbury.org.uk. We are all about making Aylesbury a greener and more sustainable place through our individual actions and through working with our council and town as to make Aylesbury a place that we're proud to call home and to bring up our children in. Practically, as I said earlier, we're looking to take action. We're looking to, not just pressure the council to do this, that, and the other, but to actually take action ourselves. And if you're interested in doing so and coming along this journey with us, there's a form you can fill in on sustainableaylesbury.org.uk. Which you can, essentially say you're interested in something in particular, and that will shape our journey as a group. We're on email at hello@sustainableaylesbury.org.uk. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/sustainableaylesbury, and of course on Twitter at sustain_Aylesbury. At sustain_Ales even. So my final thank you is to you, Edward. So thank you for taking up your Tuesday evening and for joining me today. I really appreciate your time, and it's been really interesting to chat to you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. A pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll end this now.